A lot of individuals ask me about Teams, and I wanted to really frame up what is Teams. So if I mention Word, everyone knows that's word processing. If I mention Excel, it's the analytics of numbers, or Outlook, it's email. So what are we trying to do with Teams? And historically, we have had documents or the data or content being in a solution such as a file share. I think a lot of people would recognize it with their home drive or their H drive, or maybe some public file shares in their network that might be their O file or S file or some share folder, right? And we would have a folder with a lot of content, whether it's ours specifically that we would then share out, or whether it was this collaborative folder that we would put content in and other individuals could get going. Or we were leveraging Microsoft SharePoint, whether it was SharePoint Online or SharePoint on-prem. And a lot of SharePoint sites have this library, and the purpose of that library was, though, that we could actually share the content that was being presented. And the beauty of actually SharePoint was that it had version controls, and it had backups and such. So the data itself was a little more protected than having it on a file, just a folder, which always had it to be snapped and backed up. And then we actually, as we were working on this, we would have the communications to go with it. Predominantly, that probably was Outlook in the past. It might have been Skype for Business, but as we're working, we would have emails to our coworkers, et cetera, sort of saying, "Hey, I just put in a file in our folder or our SharePoint site. Please go review it, modify it, and get back to me." Right. So therefore, that was that norm. Or maybe we would call them up, or maybe we would have a meeting and we would be discussing the document we're all working on. But the actual data, I mean, the content, as well as the actual conversations around it, were two different solutions. And the problem with that is maybe I was talking to an individual and I said, "Hey, please update that document." And the document is agenda. Well, they go to that folder, and I didn't realize there's an agenda that I had put in there. Maybe a colleague of mine had put in another agenda. So they look for that folder and they see, several agendas, and they would need to know specifically what agenda. Or, maybe I reversed the name of it or such. So there was always this like, "Hey, is this a document you wanted me to be working on?" And so then you would have to reach out back to that individual and say, "Hey, I found this document. Is this the one you want?" And there would be this little banter of, "Yes, this is the one. Great," etc. And by having the conversations there, again, you weren't being able to connect it to exactly what you're working on. Or sometimes, you would get those, should we meet, or are you attending the meeting about something you're working on? And you get those emails and you're like, do I save that? Is that something that I need to put in the project folder for what we're working on together? It's really an IM conversation that just went forward in the form of Outlook email. So trying to take what you have historically been working on and taking the conversations and meetings that was supporting and interacting with what you're working on, and combine them and put them in a single solution. That is really the end game of what Teams is. Teams is really the hub of collaboration. That is its heart and soul. Now, with all this conversations, are we replacing Outlook? If you look at this slide that I'm showing, no, actually, there is still a role for Outlook. If I want to send a strategic information to a body of an external or even internal individuals, and I really wanted to communicate a point. So I'm thinking through those words. I'm wordsmithing it. I'm strategically aligning it. Maybe I'm starting with the focus areas, etc. That type of email is best done in Outlook, especially if it's external facing. What we're talking about is that back and forth. Hey, I need this document. Check on it. Please update that. Those type of communications really need to be a part of what's going on and needs to be associated with their content. And then the other question is, are we replacing SharePoint, right? Teams seems like this whole SharePoint library, Christopher, you were just talking about. Really what we consider SharePoint's role is really that one-to-many, one being a few individuals, maybe a small team, create the content, and then those that are seeing that content aren't necessarily collaborating on it. They are actually in this read-only focus and consuming phase. Great example would be I tend to use is your holiday schedule for the calendar year, right? Only a few individuals get to create that content, but many individuals need to see and review that content. That's not collaboration. That is actually a presentation. And SharePoint or SharePoint Online, that is where it is best suited for. And then the old question of, you know what, I got this drive, and this drive is OneDrive. And it's in the cloud, Christopher, and that's where I'm going to start sharing, putting the content, and then sharing it out because it's easy to just create some links or et cetera from that. Well, OneDrive isn't really about collaboration. It's really about the individual. It's the individuals, because when that individual leaves the organization and they remove the license from O365 for that individual, then that OneDrive after 30 days disappears. So what should be in a OneDrive? A OneDrive is a perfect space for, let's say, your individual training agenda that you want to do in your year. Maybe it's your career growth strategy. Maybe it's a copy of some of your annual reviews. Maybe it's some receipts as well as your approved expense reports that you want to historically have on site. It's really me. It's all about the individual, right? So if there are times within a OneDrive, maybe you're working on a great idea and you want to show it to an individual and say, hey, I'm going to pitch this as a going forward to my next, one-on-one with my manager. And can you review this before I have my one-on-one? You know what? That document was created. It's really focused on you. It's your idea. You're presenting to your management team. But you do have that capability of sharing that individual file. But the individual file, it is not shared by default. Everything that is brought into Teams, because it is a hub of collaboration, really is by default shared by everyone in your team. So whatever document you create and you put into Teams and you're communicating with, that document can be edited and interact with everyone in your team. So a lot of times people say, Christopher, what is a team? The team, or what defines your team, that I strongly suggest is if you want individuals to contribute to the content and communications about a specific topic, then that is a perfect team or channel. If you actually want them to review and see, but not interact, then that is not a great candidate for Teams, because Teams, by default, anything shared or interacted on there, everyone within that team can interact by default, and it is extremely difficult, and I would not recommend trying to minimize who is a viewer and who is a contributor in Teams. By default, it is designed that everyone is a contributor. Thank you.